Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Becca.
And I'm Bree, and this is Spooky Happy Hour. So I just wanted to give a big shout out to everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the first episode. We got a lot of feedback, some comments. It's really appreciated. And shout out to the subscribers, the people who shared.
Yes.
It's really important that we do hear from you, and I'm really glad that we did.
Yes, I am loving all the feedback, especially from you, Fear Fam. We love you. We will always love you. And then just like a reminder, like we are really new to this. We've never done this before. We aren't professionals. I am unfortunately not as good as Connor and Dakota at editing. So you get what you get.
Yeah, I'm glad though, because I think that people have given us a lot of grace. I mean, maybe there's like one or two people that might have had like their list of things and be like, hey, here are some suggestions, which honestly I equally value as much.
Fair enough.
It's a great reminder though for everybody listening and for those watching that this is our first go around, and for us this is really like a passion project. So we love to share it with you.
Yeah, it's literally just the two of us. And we both work like full time.
That's right.
So we got to scramble and get everything together and figure it out.
Right. And I think that that's like also the thing that I appreciate about you two the most is like we do have full-time jobs, and I have a child, you have a dog that's like a child, and we have a lot of things that we have to put our time and energy into, and I love that we do put our time and energy into this. So last week, how have things been? Have you had any paranormal type experiences?
Well,
here we go.
Here we go again. Mr. Scratchy is back, people. If you listen to our next video coming out next Thursday, we go into a little bit into it. But yeah, I was editing that video and I'm just like, I'm burning over here. What's going on? And then I look into the mirror and I have like 2 scratches and they were raised, and I will try and put a photo up for people to see. And then again last night, 2 scratches like
last night
right here above my tattoo on my left arm. I was just like, okay. And it's not like 3 scratches or anything. It's just 2. But as I was telling you last night, I have a theory for all these scratches.
Which totally makes sense. And I'm so excited that we're going to put it out there, because as soon as you told me it, I was like, whoa, it's like one of those light bulb moments that just like goes off.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about it because it has been getting worse, not in like an aggressive way or anything, like no blood has been drawn. It's just like, here I am, feel the burn kind of thing. But it's like more on like all the time now. Like it's really weird. It's like it was at one point once a week, twice a week. Now it's like twice a day sometimes. But my theory is, so I used to work for a dog sledding company. I was there for about 4 years, through the whole season. So winter, summer, I was there. I grew to love about 200 of these dogs.
God, 200 dogs? That's wild.
200 at one point. So there was a lot. It was a lot of hard work, and I loved it, but sometimes I really hated it because it's a lot.
Yeah, I bet.
But when I'd be working there in the summer, I would obviously be wearing like a tank top or shorts. And since these dogs get really excited when they would see me, they would jump up. If I had treats or food, they would jump on me. And I would just like some days come home and I'd have like scratches like all over me, which is whatever. But
Yeah, you're like, "I love them, and yes, I had food."
Yeah,
Of course, you're just going to maul me whenever you see me, and this is kind of like the consequence of
exactly.
the job a little bit. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, 100%. And another consequence with that job is sometimes it is like working on a farm. You are working with animals. They do get old or they do have illnesses and they do pass. And we did have a few that did. Um, I eventually ended up quitting with this job. It was a lot of work for me and I just couldn't do it anymore. The summer after I had quit, I, for some reason, was itching to just get a psychic reading. I followed this girl on Instagram and I was just like, you know what? She's got a deal going on, so I might as well just try it. She literally did a Zoom call. She was in her car in Alberta. She was in her car and I had heard like great reviews from her. And during the session, she kind of was just like, okay, like I'm seeing a dog, but the dog keeps changing colors and then the dog keeps changing shape. Like it would look bigger and smaller and it would be like kind of like shape shifting almost. So she was super confused and I was just like, okay.
Was it like just capturing like this spectrum of like big dogs, small dogs, like whatever? Like, did she have a theory as to why it was like taking all these different shapes and forms?
Well, she eventually said that she just started to see like a lot of dogs just circling me. And when you work for a dog sledding company, sometimes you picture they're all huskies. They're all going to look like the movie Snow Dogs kind of thing.
Mm.
It's not true. Sometimes those big fluffy ones are the worst of the bunch and they are the laziest of the bunch. Because up in Alaska, like they've got pointer looking dogs and especially my dog, she used to be a lead dog of a sled and she just doesn't look like a dog sled. She looks like Santa's little helper from The Simpsons, but like chubby. So, but anyway, she said she saw these dogs like circling me. And then she was like, these dogs or this dog or whatever, she was super confused, but she was just like, they want me to tell you thank you. They want to say thank you for all the hard work you've done. I was pretty much an advocate for them, a cheerleader for them. They knew this job was hard on me and they knew I couldn't be there for a long time, but they really appreciated the time that they had with me. And as she's like, oh, well, it was super close. Yeah. But as she was like saying all this, she looked really confused because she's just like, what the frig is this? And then she looks at me and she goes, does this make any sense to you? And I was like, oh, 100%. And then I told her, like, I used to work for a dog sledding company. And she goes, oh, okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah, like her light bulb in her head went off too, being like, oh, okay, this does correlate to what you've experienced.
Yeah. And like sometimes I'd be like there by myself. I would have Spotify on and I'd be singing to them with my terrible musical voice that I have. But they appreciated it and it was glad to hear that they appreciated me being there for me, it just didn't seem that long of a time to be there because, you know, some of them are still there and I do miss them, but it was just kind of like a wild experience. So that's where I think maybe my scratches are coming from. Maybe they're just like, look at me and like jump up or something. Like, I don't know.
When you get them, does it feel like, do you have this really horrible, terrible feeling? I think that people do associate with getting scratched, or like, since you have that perspective now, do you think about it when it happens and does it actually like comfort you more so that maybe you aren't as like freaked out about it? Or
I don't know. Like I've never felt, as I said before, I've never felt any negativity around it. I don't really know what's going to happen. I think it was, last night I said I was just sitting on the couch, like watching, nothing to do with ghosts, I don't think. I think I was watching Golden Girls.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sometimes it's my comfort show now. But yeah, I don't feel anything. Like, as I said, like it happens to me in the bathroom, like when I'm having a bath and randomly on the couch, but when it happened when I was editing our last video, I was just sitting here and I'm just like, my arm feels hot. And then I just look in the mirror because now that's a thing I need to do. Because if I feel burning, I'm just like, where is
You
it?
gotta figure it out for sure.
Yeah. So
Well, I hope it does bring you more comfort though, like when you get them that, maybe it's just them wanting to be near you and wanting to like have that playful, like, hey, I just woke up for a nap, or hey, I want you to play with me, or whatever it might be. And I wonder too if she gets like animals or pets in like readings often, or because I
yeah.
would think that like a lot of people would experience that. Maybe not scratches, but I'm sure like pets and stuff that they've had that maybe have moved on that do want to say like, hey, I'm okay.
Yeah. Like I've had another session where it was like, oh, my German Shepherd is kind of always with me that I grew up with. He died when he was 10. And I tend to get more animal stuff around me for some reason. Like I've done like a full moon meditation. I had a weird experience of what my spirit animal was. It was a black wolf that spoke British to me. So that was interesting.
Wow, that is interesting.
Yeah. I've done a couple weird things, but
Definitely really animal related. So it just seems like that's like something, a draw for you, just kind of how we talked about in our intro episode, right? Like what's drawing us to these certain things. It's like this is a large component in your life.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that
100%.
with us. I think that is such a cool experience. And if anybody has had experiences with like mediums or psychics and you want to tell us about them, I am all for that. I've seen a couple myself have some profound experiences, and then some that they're not the greatest,
Oh
which I'm
no.
sure people do have as well. So give us the good, bad, and the ugly. We're ready for it. Something that I
Yeah.
was reading recently that it totally has changed, not changed, I guess, but like maybe largely influenced how I'm starting to see the paranormal. And I did not expect it when I started this book. So
Ooh.
for those of you that have Spotify, they just started putting audiobooks on there.
Yes.
So it is way easier for me to listen to something than it is for me to intentionally sit down and be able to read something. So I saw that Amy Bruni, who started out on Ghost Hunters, she was there for 7 seasons. She has her own show, Kindred Spirits. She has her own podcast. This book's out now. Like she's really branched out on her own. So her book, Life with the Afterlife, 13 Truths I Learned About Ghosts, is the book. And not only have I learned so much about her perspective on stuff, but she revisits a lot of the places that they went to in Ghost Hunters. And so I'm learning much more about large iconic locations that I didn't really know about before and their actual histories. Like she debunks so much stuff through research because that's kind of like her niche. She debunks so much stuff that we think that we know about these locations. So it was also really cool to get other type of history that wasn't really associated with the things that you've seen on TV. Some yes, but like some no. So her role and how she sees it is that she's kind of like a social worker for the afterlife.
Ooh.
So her and Adam Berry, who's her co-host, right, for Kindred Spirits, where they do their investigations together, he was also on Ghost Hunters. And she said that all of these different episodes that they would do, they'd go to these locations, and the most common experiences they had with like EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, was help me. And she said that they felt so guilty going into these locations, having these spirits ask them for help, just documenting that evidence and then bailing.
Yeah.
So her big thing is that like spirits or ghosts are people too. They have been, they still are, they just exist on a different realm. So that's why she really started Kindred Spirits, was that she wanted to go into these places where human people needed help, because most of the time they had some sort of spirit or energy that also needed help. And so she doesn't guide them into the light or anything. Like she thinks that that's like not a practice that people should participate in, because it's kind of like therapy, right? To me, and that's kind of what her and Adam joke about their roles in the paranormal, is this therapist for the afterlife. So of course that really like calls out to me because that's what I do every single day. And like I help people and it just makes sense. And so she said, yeah, when we help these people or we get them the answers that they need, or we just validate that like they can exist here and they're okay, generally the activity decreases. Like we don't really know what happens to them. We don't know if they go into a certain light and go into a different afterlife or the next step, or if they're just hanging out still and they don't feel the need to use their energy to do things or to scare people or whatnot. So she just keeps saying and reiterating over and over again, like ghosts are people too, in that they stay behind to finish their business. And for me, I thought that was just so cool. And now whenever I do go on like more investigations and like, you know, when we're in the tunnels of Penhurst, and we've already covered some of those, some of that history. It's like something that I think that I'm going to really be intentional about and keep in mind is that there are people, like these are people's spirits, not just ghosts, right? There are people that have spirits there. And I mean, yes, of course, from time to time, non-human type energy will be there. Hopefully we don't run into any of that. But I just thought her perspective on it was so cool. And I didn't think about it that way before.
Really?
Yeah, like I didn't like, of course they're there and like I know that, but I feel like there was this like big barrier, right? Like the veil, you know, if you will. But like I'm on this side and you're on this side. So how can you experience anything that I'm experiencing? Because you might be 112 years old. Like, sorry, you're stuck in this like place. But you know, it's like kind of how Dakota, and we'll get into this a little bit in this episode, is like telling like surround yourself with the light. Like these people, they can't hurt you and they can't touch you. So it's like there is this large, obviously, distinction between being alive and being dead. However, I think that like Amy bridges the gap, not just by investigating and using all of these different tools to communicate, but by always keeping in the back of their head that she's encompassing their whole lives and their whole experiences while being dead here. So she has a very dedicated mission to find out everything that she can about a place, about the location, about these spirits, but not just who they are and that they exist, but so much deeper than that. And I think I really appreciate that perspective a lot more.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes the most sense because, we get kind of scared because it's something that we can't see. We're in the dark. And for some reason, things tend to happen more when we are scared in the dark, like when our fears are heightened, which is the whole experiment behind Destination Fear. But I guess, like you have to realize too, especially with like a place like Penhurst, like so many patients died. And if you die at a location and you don't know you're dead, you're just kind of going on with your day kind of thing, which would be so kind of scary to even experience too on that level.
Well, like all that residual stuff. And so like when you have a place where so many deaths have occurred or such bad stuff happens, like where they go in this episode that we're about to talk about is Brushy State Penitentiary, it makes it a little bit more real, right? It's like when you can think about these people when they were alive and all of the stories that have been told, and put yourself in their shoes of what they experienced, and then realize that they might be there, like you said, reliving that same day or reliving those things of their life over and over again. It really does put into this empathy into perspective, right? And not that we didn't have it before. We know about these locations and to be respectful and whatnot. However, I think that like when you do just take that step further to just take 1 second to reflect about the what they've gone through in those experiences, like we have to have that empathy too. So I'm really glad. I hope I finish the book before we go on our road trip too, just because she's had so much experience and I want to bring that knowledge that like I'll have to then into these things. So we are going to get into it. If you have followed along to rewatch with us, that you've already watched it. If not, watch it and then listen to us afterwards and see if there's anything that we may have missed that you think is really cool. So we are going to review today Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. It's nestled within the cliffs of Petros, Tennessee. It's a secluded prison known as the Alcatraz of the South, commonly compared to Siberian prison camps, that is at the end of a single road coming in and going out. Due to the cruelty and heinous crimes committed inside these walls, as well as the ones that led them to this place of absolute torture, it is a breeding ground for darkness. In its 113-year history, thousands of deaths have occurred on the property. Ongoing violence, chronic illnesses, abusive working conditions, and fatal mining accidents contributed to the need for quality medical care, to which there were none.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. But within these hazardous conditions, this only grew to be more impactful with overcrowding in the prison as well. At one point, it was holding 1,000 inmates when its capacity was less than only 400. The state could no longer ignore the need for an expansion, and in 1934 built the structure that we now know to be Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. The most infamous inmate to serve part of his sentence at this maximum security prison was no other than Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassin, James Earl Ray.
Insane that he was even there to begin with, and also a spirit that we're going to talk about. He attempted to escape 3 times, only succeeding once, and was returned 48 hours later. Payback was coming for him, and he was stabbed 22 times, and some say that was for retribution for MLK. James Earl Ray was among many evil men that spent their lives at Brushy. One notably went by the name Fast Food Killer.
Oh, yes. In 1997, Paul Dennis Reed killed 7 fast food workers ranging in the ages from 16 to 25 while they were on the job. Some bodies he even stashed in the establishment coolers, and others he dumped in a nearby state park. He was given 7 life sentences, the most in Tennessee's history. The darkness of Brushy was shut down for good in the summer of 2009. Since 2018, it has been open to the public for various events and paranormal or otherwise.
2009, to me anyway, that's the year I graduated high school.
I know.
Not that long ago.
No, it's not. Really.
You know, like 113 years of history, and one of those being in 2009 to be completely done. To me, it's just, if you're like in the 2000s era, I don't know if it's just because like I want to pretend that like 20 years ago was like 1990 and not like
I still think like
but
1980s was like 20 years ago.
Yeah,
like, it has to be.
It's crazy that that was still open when I was 18 and graduating high school. When you think about where it started from and all these like fatal mining accidents and how that has evolved over time to what has been there, that, I mean, I think that that's the craziest thing to me is like 113 years. That's a lot of history. And they also go on to say, right, that the shape of this prison was designed very intentionally. It was a shape of an upside down cross. So not only is that demonic in nature, so I think that like, you know, we're really getting into some hairy things there too, but the reason why it was said that it was built this way was to send a message to the inmates that they were unworthy. So if we're talking about energy, this is like a setup for really bad negative energy. For the resentment that might be there, the shame, all of the negativity, that's really contagious. And it sticks, all that negative energy sticks into the walls of certain places. And that's, you know, one theory in the paranormal, right? There's all of these different conduits like limestone and water. And you know, we'll talk about all of those things, I'm sure, at a later time as well. But all of that energy is just drawn there and it stays there.
Yeah, and they call that the stone tape theory, I believe.
Right.
And also, what is so wild to me is there is only 3 walls containing the prison, and the other wall is just a friggin' cliff. So if you want to escape and attempt to climb that cliff, good luck.
Yeah, well, no wonder like James Earl Ray was returned like 48 hours later is because like there was no real means of escape where you would be gone for too long. And knowing that there's a single road going in and a single road going out, clearly very secluded, very isolated, and with one of those sides being this mountain, right? There were I always wonder, like, okay, well, how close is the town? And it's not very close. So to
No.
hear more about the history of the older townspeople, right, saying that they could hear the screams from inmates from town, how can
Wild.
you do that when you're so secluded? You're surrounded by these mountains, you're away from town. Like, can you imagine how awful it must have been if you were
Mhm.
living in town and could hear it?
Yeah, like, they were beaten so badly, they would take them outside, and the townspeople could hear that. Like, that is insane to me, and then, like, you're just going on your merry way, your normal life with that in the background while you're doing your grocery shopping, like, "Oh my god."
Right, it's like something that could you even ignore that? Like, for me, I'd be
Yeah.
like, "What's going on there?" And what was going on
Mhm.
there was that, like, guards were murdering inmates for
Mhm.
no apparent reason. They were shooting
Yep.
them and letting them lay for days at a time until
Yeah.
something took them away or someone took them away. And so we also have that kind of like, there's no proper burial there. There's a
Mhm.
complete desecration of a dead body.
Mhm.
And not having a proper burial is said, in the paranormal world to have some sort of unfinished business then. Like you're a ghost that could have some vengeance because
Mhm.
you weren't taken care of in the afterlife either. So I'm sure that
Yeah.
if that was happening to so many of these inmates there, that
Mhm.
those restless spirits are also still contained in the prison. And I
Mhm.
think in one of the episodes in the future, that there is kind of like a theory that like if you died in prison, you stayed in prison. And so if
Oh.
that was true in Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, there's a lot of spirits there.
Yeah. Well, it makes the most sense, like, if you die somewhere, you're kinda stuck there, but also it could be, I don't know, a religious thing. Like if you have done bad, like maybe you can't move on and find the light or go somewhere, but then you have other locations like a house where someone dies in a house and they're still there. Like, I don't know if people just become like attached to something, like especially your home. If you
Mhm.
die in your house, you're very attached to it and you end up dying there and maybe you just want to stay there. Like it's more of a comfort thing, or you just don't know where you are. Like there's so many questions behind the paranormal and what happens when we truly die. Like we don't know.
Yeah, we have
And
no clue. We only know what we can see or what we can hear, what we can feel and experience. And the haunted accounts from this location, I mean, they're pretty abundant, right? There's
Mhm.
physical attacks, there's especially in this episode, right? There's
Yeah.
like a lot of like audible noises, but
Mhm.
the townspeople and like other people that have gone to Brushy for some of these events and to investigate themselves, they've seen um, like a it's like a creeper. I feel like everybody has like
Mhm.
their little version
Yeah.
of like what that
Yeah.
is. So I know you'll hear us say that multiple times, but they do. They have a creeper. There
Mhm.
was some scratching that resulted in blood being drawn, which
Yes. The
is
general
wild to
manager.
me that right,
Yeah.
like, that's pretty forceful. You have to do a lot to be able
Mhm.
to draw blood.
Yeah, like I have yet to experience that with my my scratches, but
And some of yours are, like, profound and, like, they
the
go up they
raised.
raise off the skin, yeah, like,
Mhm.
to see that happen and know that there's even, like, steps further where, like, blood's being drawn,
Mhm.
that's probably, like, that's a super crazy physical attack. Just like
Yeah.
when their, throats, like, it had been slit, like, some of the prisoners, right, their
Mhm.
throats were slit. And so some people think that, and feel that their breath has been restricted so that they
Yeah.
can't breathe. So a lot of physical things, and of course, audible noises are heard too.
Mhm.
So the cruise experiences really did match up
Mhm.
to a lot of these accounts.
This is true, and since we're starting with the beginning with Destination Fear episode 1, Dakota states like these are 10 locations we're going to, so that means 10 episodes of season 1, and they are all chosen by Dakota. And they go to each location, and before they go there, they have like a packet read. And the look on Chelsea's face, she was not very excited about this one.
No.
But saying that since our last episode with Trail to Terror, 2015, I think it's been a couple years past. Even in this episode, the intro even states Dakota has been investigating with Ghost Adventures. He has a bit of experience added to his resume now. He's worked with guys who have been doing it for a long time. He's worked with the new devices that he's never worked with before. So he's bringing this all to the table. And even though Tanner and Chelsea have experienced a little bit, it's been a while since they have. And now we have Alex added to the team, even though poor guy's only introduced as a cameraman. But we always love the cameraman.
Yeah, we have to have one. He's essential.
We have to. He is so essential in this. And I don't think he's really experienced like anything like this level per se.
It doesn't seem so. I was kind of wondering about that recently, was like, he was very much, you guys are going to experience this. It's something for you. And I had wondered if it was because like maybe he felt really maybe like amateur hour, kind of like, I know Chelsea feels that way too. And like Tanner, maybe even to some degree, like because Dakota has had those experiences. So I wonder if Alex ever thought that he was going to move any further than being the camera operator.
Yeah, and this is what I love about this episode, because they kind of focus on just the three, but it goes, oh, by the way, like, here's our cameraman Alex, but you're sleeping alone too.
Yeah, so they go into these places, and generally they do more of that group investigation, right? And then they go into solos and sleeping alone. So it just makes sense. Well, yeah, Alex, you're going to have your own solo alone time. So things might happen to you too.
Yeah. Well, it's going to happen. And the thing, actually, when I was rewatching this, just to get a refresher, the thing I noticed was it's very, obviously they do have other camera people around. It is on a travel channel. It is a production. But once we go inside, it's just them. Just them, their cameras, no distractions, which I do really love about what they bring to the table now. It's just them. And I find going back, their experiences are just so wild and they're so new to this. Like once they even walk in, so whoever has been watching Project Fear, once they walk in, we have a bird situation. We're not
There's
that
so
in
many
very
bird situations throughout these seasons in Project Fear. So many, especially in these abandoned locations. I mean, this is like not technically abandoned, right? But these places have been open, right, to the outside. So you're going to have that element too of like, what's in here at one point in time in the future? They have a snake. Like, there's a lot that could happen that, you know, is not paranormal, and they do get to see that.
Yes. We definitely get to see Chelsea hit the floor within like the first 5 minutes of them exploring. But Chelsea is our bird whisperer, is she not? Like, I think this very first season, it just foreshadows what's to come down the road. In all honesty, she is our bird whisperer, and I think this is where it all started.
I know, it's so funny. She like says like, oh guys, I hear something, right? And there's this bird that just flies out of nowhere. They all hit the floor. Thank God she didn't like, you know, blow her back out this time. But I think that kind of like gave them a little jump start in their hearts, right? And they laugh about it, of course, afterwards, of like that's what it was. However, what a way to start off.
Exactly. Like even for us viewers, because I hadn't watched it in a while, and I was just like, oh shit, like that thing really comes out.
I know, and shoots out of there. It's like if you were going and you were thinking like, oh my gosh, this is a haunted place, right?
Ghosts.
And something just jumps out at you, like you're not going to think, oh, it's going to be a bird. It's fine. Like you think something's coming to attack you.
Oh, 100%. It's so funny. I'm sorry, but I will reference Ghost Adventures again. There is an episode where Aaron is like, what is that? I think they're like a coal mine or something. And he sees like these two eyes and he hears rustling and he goes, oh my God, it's a bear. It's a bear. And it's like a raccoon.
Like, yeah, and you never know.
Yeah, you never know. But you always think like worst case scenario.
For sure.
This is something that's going to attack me and I have to leave the premise right now.
110%. I would think the same thing. You know, you're there and the fear factor is already there. You're already thinking like, if I turn around this corner, what could be there, what's coming for me. You hear audible things, and then it comes. So I laughed so hard at that part, because it was just like, if like you've ever been on a hike and there's that false summit, you think
Yeah.
that you're there and you're not.
You're
And then
not.
you have to go a longer way. I feel like that was kind of like what happened to them too. It was like they were met with something that was totally false. Let them have their guard down a little bit and start laughing. And then the rest of the night, they definitely had to have their guard up.
The rest of the night starts getting interesting, especially once they enter the area where they find the auditorium door, where Tanner tries to get in there, but for some reason the door seems to be pretty locked. And that thing is a huge door. Like, that's the size of my headboard. Like, I'm looking at my bed and I'm like, that door is huge.
And it's like super thick too. It's like it had one of those openings where it's not just like a normal, or one of those handles where it's not like a normal
you have to
door.
like pull down and
like
a bolt almost, like a
that's kind of like what it was. It was like the door is super thick too, and like made of steel, so it's very heavy as well.
Yeah, and then once he's trying to get in there, and they're like, "Oh, okay, their guard's down now. Oh, we can't get in." And what do we hear? Bang! Just like on the other side of the door, and they do get a little excited.
You could hear it echo. You know, like even on camera, was that like you could hear it reverberate, right? And so it was loud, and the structure of the door, like we had just said, the material that it's made of, that's going to make a large audible sound that's going to affect you on like a physical level. Like, when you get into a car and you hear like the drop of a bass, right? And you can like feel it in your body. That's kind of how I could imagine that feeling, is that it hit on the door and it just reverberated, and they probably felt it too.
Yeah, like with that echo, they probably did feel it. And then again, it happens, another bang on the door. So either, you never know, what if someone's just like, hey, like, I want to get in there, or like, don't come in here. Like,
yeah,
either or.
Funny, in Amy Bruni's book too, she was talking about the same thing. She's like, sometimes people want to, like, the spirits want to get your attention because they want, your help, or they want to give you a message or tell you a certain thing. She's like, and then I've definitely interacted with spirits who just want to scare you. Like if somebody hasn't, one of the spirits, right, hasn't been there in quite some time or something, they're going to want to get a rise out of you. And so there's all these different types of spirits, but you never know, right? Like this bang on the wall, or bang on this door, was it like, don't come in here? I'm trying to like, not just scare you, but say leave? Am I trying to say like, come on in? Am I trying to say, I can't open the door either, man? Let's get in here, or what?
Like, help me out, dude. But we have to remember, this is prison. And sometimes prisoners, they just do stuff for fun. They want to mess with you. They want to make you mad. Like, sometimes when you're bored, you just want to stir the pot. Really?
Well, being in prison, right? Especially if we're going with the theory that they are bound within there and really can't leave, they're going to make the most out of whatever time that they do have in there. So when they have someone else in there, it makes sense why all of these haunted accounts are the way they are, right? They're full gambit, not only physical attacks, which happen, as we know from the history, quite often there, but also having more of the residual type of noises, right? Maybe a cell door slamming, or scuffling of boots, or keys jangling. Like, those are much more of residual things. And so the difference between, for our viewers and listeners out there, if you don't know, there can be different types of hauntings, right? Like residual hauntings, and there's like intelligent hauntings. So residual ones are just like what it would have been like in operation when that spirit was there. So whatever environment that haunted location is, it would just be like it was a day-to-day thing that's happening, and you're experiencing those day-to-day effects. And then more of the intelligent haunting is that, one, they know they're dead. Two, they know what they can do. And they will communicate with you directly. If you ask them a question, they will answer it accordingly. So you do have probably both types of hauntings really in all of these different places. There are going to be some spirits that are just there going about their daily business. They just think it's a normal day. They might not even know that they're dead. And then there are some intelligent spirits that do want to scare you, like you were saying, do want to have fun with their experience of you, and they do want to communicate with you too.
And also, they probably will also pretend that they aren't what they say they are, like, especially with like if a word comes out through like the ovulus or something that says demon, like how do you really know if it's a demon? What if it's just a spirit pretending to say that just to mess with you? And especially in these big scary locations, like you never know.
Well, that's the whole point, right? That Dakota talks about too, is that like it's the fear of the unknown and
Mhm.
really pushing your fear to your level to see when do you break? What are your
Mhm.
boundaries around that? And I
Mhm.
really like how um they talk about stuff in the RV too. So when they're
Yeah.
on these road trips, they're in an RV. And we do get to see like some funny stuff from them and the things that
Mhm.
they also experience on the road. But they do very candidly talk about all of the things that we are leading up to this, right? It's like
Mhm.
what type of spirits are out there, how we might feel, what is the goal of this investigation. And I think one of the bigger overall goals for them in this season that they set out is to really like push their barriers because like you
Yes.
said, what are these barriers that they have to fear, and a lot of it is being amateurs,
Mhm.
and except Dakota, but Dakota is also right there with them in terms of like how scared he can get and what he's feeling as well. So even when him and Chelsea ever get together, they say like, yeah, we just feed off of each other's fear and we're chickens.
Yes. Yes. And plus probably siblings, like they're so close with one another, like they know how one another's going to react. But at the same time, since he has this experience, he was just a camera guy on Ghost Adventures, and sometimes things would happen to him. But now he is our fearless leader of the group. And he pretty much has to control everything, like decide where they're going. And everyone's looking to him, like, what's going to happen? What do we do? Kind of thing. And I think was a whole different ball game for him, really, because now he's the leader of the group. And
He
especially
wants to put it out there more, like, too.
he
He
wants
wants
to,
to
yeah.
do these things, and he's
Yeah.
pushing himself,
Mhm.
just as much as he's pushing anybody else.
Yeah. And I think putting yourself into that role, you can really see a difference in personality. He is a little shaken up a lot. And I think things start affecting him more. Like there's one part where he starts making his way up the stairs, and you can see him like sway a little bit. Like he literally leans back, and he starts to feel heavy, and he looks pretty anxious. And you can hear him say like, "I'm scared," like a
Yeah, and
lot.
he, like, gets dizzy, too. It's kind of like
Mhm,
that vertigo that you experience whenever something
mhm,
throws you off or you know that you're being physically affected by something, and I think the physical ones, not that the emotional stuff doesn't take its toll, too, when you're
mhm.
in a place that does have so many deaths, but I think that the physical stuff you just react to more because it's a way different experience than anything
Yeah,
else.
yeah, 100%. Because it's just you don't know, like, is something affecting me or is this really happening? And
Am I sick? Did I forget to take a certain
yeah.
medication that I normally do? Like, is
Mhm,
the 20-ounce Red Bull that Tanner chugged beforehand, is that, what's affecting him at that point in time, right? I think that there's so many different factors, and it does enhance that whole fear that Dakota is putting into the test of like, what is the unknown? I don't have any answers for this. I don't know what's going on with myself.
mhm,
I might not know what's really going to go on in these locations, and they don't. And
mhm,
one of my favorite things that they do that I think really lets the fear come in is
mhm.
when they go silent and dark. Because I
Yes,
think every time they do, something happens.
yes, something happens. And I think it's at this point, Chelsea is kind of paired with Alex, and they're just wandering around, and they happen to get into the auditorium somehow, different doorway. And then everyone kind of meets up and they just go silent. And this is where Tanner's throat starts to get like a little scratchy, and he starts coughing, and he needs to use his inhaler. And like, is that a residual effect, or is that dust getting into his lungs kind of thing?
Right, you don't know. And it's important to note that in the auditorium, there were haunted accounts of
Mhm.
people feeling like their breathing was restricted because several people had gotten their throats slit in the
Yeah.
auditorium. And so
Mhm.
knowing that history beforehand, I think that when things like this happen, of course, the crew reacts like, we have to get you out of here. Alex
Mhm.
even says, like, bro, you played college football. Like, I've never seen you
Yeah.
like not be able to really catch your breath like that. And
Mhm.
I'll get into this more when we do our episode for Ohio State Reformatory, but I had never been physically affected by anything in my life, no matter how many little ghost hunts or tours or whatever I had gotten into. But something with me in Ohio State Reformatory, we have unfinished business. And
Ugh.
I will go back there at some point in time. But on the tour, we had gone up like 3 or 4 flights of stairs, right? And we get into this big open room and our tour guide's not saying anything yet. And I'm kind of out of breath, but I was like, okay, I just walked up 4 flights of stairs and
Mhm.
maybe that has something to do with it. I didn't really think anything else of it. And
Yeah.
then he's talking, we're in this gigantic room. He's talking on one side of it, and I'm over at a window and I was looking out and seeing what was around us. And I kept having this feeling like I was still walking up the stairs, like my chest was really heavy and I kept trying to take this big deep breath and it just was not I wasn't getting enough air and I wasn't sure
Oh.
why. I was even like rubbing my sternum like with my knuckles, like just trying to like get some air in there. And
Mhm.
the person I was with that we did the tour with, he looked at me and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I said, maybe I need like a drink of water. Like, I don't know, but like it feels like I can't catch my breath. And
Mhm.
then I'm tuning in to what the tour guide is saying, and he's talking about that wing specifically of the prison being the hospital wing and that they treated tuberculosis there.
Oh,
And I was like,
weird.
whoa, I didn't know this history beforehand. And I'm finding it out in the
Yeah.
moment. And so when I'm feeling like this, really I'm saying, man, like I must be like hella out of shape. Like I did not think that like I would feel
Oh,
this
no.
winded. And then after I have all of this information, then it's that light bulb moment that goes off. And I was like, wait a minute, this is much like we had climbed up stairs along this entire tour and I did not feel this way.
Mhm.
So I knew that I was being affected by something. And so I can empathize with Tanner a lot in that moment where you
Yeah.
just don't feel like the normal, non voluntary, right? Those involuntary responses like breathing that your
Mhm.
body does, it is being restricted and there is nothing that tells you why it's happening. And so like we were talking about a couple episodes ago, it's if you can not debunk it and it's
Mhm.
completely unexplained, then I'm probably going to assign some sort of paranormal meaning to it.
Yeah, like I said, when I went to those ruins, I felt wonky and I felt drunk and like I was walking through the mud and that was the weirdest thing to me. And you try to figure out like, okay, like is this something else? But especially something with so small of like just like your throat getting like itchy and starting to cough, like you just don't
Mhm.
know. But even like with me, I'm like, I don't know, am I having a moment? Like,
Right.
like,
Well,
I
and
don't
you wanna
know.
be able to find one, right? Like, you wanna be
Mhm.
able to find a reason, you wanna be able to find some sort of evidence to say, "Well, this isn't where my head might go first," which might be like, "Oh my gosh, my there's a ghost that's affecting me." It's like, "No, let's think about realistic things," and
Yeah.
then when you realize that the ghost option is a realistic thing, it's like you
Mhm.
have to take this into consideration. I'm just glad that, like because I think that when you do get into a certain situation like that, like, you gotta go. Like, you have to leave,
Yeah.
you have to, like, change something up, right? So,
Yes.
I immediately went into a different room. It was kind of like ahead of the tour, before we had gone outside, and as soon as I was outside and I could breathe fresh air, it kind of all went away.
Mhm.
So, kind of just like
Wow.
how Tanner gets out of there and, like, everything's
Mhm.
fine. He literally leaves the auditorium and he can breathe. He's no
Fine.
longer coughing. There's no need for an inhaler. And so I can
Yeah.
definitely empathize with that, like leaving that area and just getting some fresh air. I was totally fine. Way better. Um, the next thing though that does happen, they do need to split up, right? Like it kind of
Mhm.
concludes their group investigation. They take a break and now they're going to split up and sleep alone. So when they do sleep alone, they have a discussion, they pick out all of the scariest locations that they can think of. They
Mhm.
write it on a piece of paper, throw it in a hat, and
Mhm.
then they do a draw and they leave it up to fate to say who goes to sleep where.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just wanna kinda mention before they do sleep alone, they do go into the D block at one point, all four of them. And then like Tanner, Chelsea, and Dakota go into a cell each, but Alex is kind of like outside of it filming the cells. And he says he can kind of feel like something, like, you know, when you like sense something is like kind of near you, but you don't see anything. And then he hears like scuffling coming towards him. And then he kind of just like, yeah. And he kind of just like backs up and is like, what the heck? And that's when Dakota whips out the Ovulus. And this is kind of like the first time they've ever used it. For those who don't know, the Ovulus is a device that spirits can manipulate, and they can choose words that they'd like to use. It's almost like a digital dictionary. But after he whips it out, there are no responses. So there was that as well, which was pretty crazy.
Totally forgot about that. I love that Chelsea was the one who did the experiment. I'm totally going to refill my drink, so
pouring.
Gotta give the pour its own part of this. Cheers.
Cheers. I feel like I've been drinking a lot. Like I'm just like, drink a beer, like Luke Bryan says.
It's spooky happy hour, my girlfriend. Come on.
Yes.
But I think that it's so cool that it's Chelsea's idea to do this, right? They go into D-block, and Chelsea's like, oh, we should all get in a cell. And I'm like, girl, you are getting ballsy.
Yeah.
And they do. And I think that goes even further into Dakota's experiment and his theory, right? That like when you're alone, paranormal activity ramps up. They were in D-block. They, you know, had some of those like feelings, right? Like something's definitely off. But then whenever they go and they separate into these cells, what seems like, I don't know if it's the editing, right? But what seems like as soon as they get in there and they wait a couple seconds, that's when something happens. And then they all hear it. And when you're all secluded like that, but you can hear the same thing and that's not disputable, you have to go figure out what it is. And so they do have that scuffling and you can hear it. It's like boots on the ground.
Yeah, it's literally like something is coming towards Alex. So like if I've never heard anything audible, so that's like a whole different ballgame for me. If I heard that, I'd probably throw the camera and just be like, what this?
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
Like the other day, it was probably like last week. I was laying in bed. It was at night. Everybody else in my house was asleep, and I was facing like this way, and I'm a side sleeper for the most part. So I'm on my side trying to go to sleep, and I didn't even hear anything. No audible, nothing, no scuffling, no nothing. But something in me felt like something was standing on the side of my bed that I had to whip around so fast because I thought something was there. And there was nothing that like drew my attention to doing that. It was just this feeling that I got. I wasn't watching anything. I was ready to go to sleep. I wasn't even thinking about anything, honestly. And if anybody knows me, like my brain is going all of the time. But my brain was off. I was right about to go into a slumber. And I just felt that there was presence there and I whipped around. So having that feeling inside of you that you can't explain and responding to it is one thing. But having that feeling and hearing something like it's coming for you, like it's shuffling or running towards you, possibly even charging you, that's a double whammy.
I couldn't imagine. Like I've had that sense of like something is there, and I'll completely go off topic, but like when I was younger, I used to always feel like somebody was standing at the end of my bed, and it felt like there was more than one for some reason. And when I was younger, it's so funny. I used to be afraid of everything. Like everything. Look how I turned out.
And now you're like, I'm chasing my own fear.
I just want to be in the fear at this point. But when I was younger, and this is so embarrassing, but I used to be so afraid. I'd call my mom and I'd make her like sleep in the room with me. And she had this agreement. If she was going to sleep in the room with me, she gets the bed and I get the floor. So I was like, fine, done. I'm scared.
You're like, I don't care as long as you're here.
As long as you're here. And I had that like comfort and I would just like fall asleep. But she told me she saw this. One night she kicks herself that she didn't look at the clock or write anything down, but you never think of this in the moment. But
Right.
she woke up randomly, middle of the night, and she goes, no lie, some gold thing was like
Gold? That's
sta-
different.
that's a different one. It was standing and almost leaning over me. Yeah, and she said it kind of turned, and where it faced, there was like I had this like mirror, and she could see it turn and face it, and it had a tail. And
Getting like
then
Teen Wolf vibes, if anybody's ever watched that
not
movie, Teen Wolf.
not like I don't think like a dog.
No, like on Teen Wolf, there's a Panama, right? It's like a half wolf, half some type of creature. It has like a tail and
I've never
whatever.
seen the show.
But it's like a little. Oh my god, the show's so amazing. You have to watch it.
Oh god.
But yeah, no, that's what it reminds me of. Is just like this otherworldly
Interesting.
type thing.
Weird. She described it as like it looked like a person. It had a head, it had shoulders. She could see like the silhouette of it, but it had like this tail. And then it was like, oh, someone sees me. It went right through my door. And she was just like, what the F was that? Am I crazy? She immediately got up and went out to the hallway area, and she was just like worried about my brother because she was like, what the heck? And she didn't see
where
anything.
Did it go?
It just was like, boop, gone. And years later, I had mentioned this to a psychic medium. I've seen a few. Sometimes you give or take whatever information is given to you. All I gave this woman was my name, my birthday, and then where I was born, the location. And I kind of mentioned this to her. I was like, I always felt like something was standing at the end of my bed. And she was just like, those are your guardian angels. They always are at your foot, kind of like the foot of your bed where your feet are. They keep you grounded. So that is where they're grounding you. And before I even asked her, she was just like, this is not a family member. This is not your grandma. This is nobody you know. And I was like, describing what my mom saw. And she was like, sometimes they do come in different forms, and it just happened to be in that form. And apparently this thing's always with me. So I don't know.
Wild. I know. I need to get back onto the Instagram of your former psychic, because now I want to know all of these things too. You know, it's kind of freaky, but at the same time, it's like it connects all of those experiences that we do have. And like, one of the ones on this episode that I think like connects, right? Like, I think it's during the group investigation too, before they split and sleep alone, but they're at the James Earl Ray cell. It's cell 28.
Yes.
And Chelsea has her hood up, and Tanner says, yo, dude, take your hood down so that they can see you. And as soon as she does, lets out her blonde long hair, the ovulus kicks on and says, mommy, and kiss, I believe.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have as much activity on the ovulus during this time. But that kind of correlates, right? Like being able to have one experience and then it correlates to another experience. Like, this is not just a coincidence then. So when they do go to sleep alone, they do draw their locations for their sleeping arrangements. Chelsea, of course, gets the James Earl Ray cell because why not?
Hey, mommy.
Right? Dakota goes to the hospital where it was on the 3rd floor, and he was feeling kind of dizzy. And he even says at one point, like, I don't want to be the person that's up here.
No,
and
he was not excited.
Not at all. And then Tanner's also in the hole, which is also kind of funny because he didn't want to be in that location.
No.
When they were talking about like where they did not want to be, everybody got the location that they did not want.
I didn't even think of that. That is wild. They're all like, I don't want to be here. And it's just like, too bad.
Fate was like, well, that's exactly where you're going to be.
This is your first episode, so have a good time.
Right? And I do love, because they usually do this, right? I love that they all go and like set up the sleeping arrangements, you know, like they'll go in a group and set Chelsea up, and then they'll go set someone else up, and then poor Alex has to walk back to the gear room where he has to stay like by himself. But it's cool that they go and like make sure that everybody's cool and fine in their arrangements. And while Dakota's being able to do that for Chelsea Chelsea's like, oh, we got these things on the obvious last time. Let's take that for me and my sleeping arrangement, dummy.
I think honestly, like, I think she thought it was a really good idea as an investigator. Like, I just want
It was
to
a
get
great idea.
more, but I don't think she realized once she was in that environment, she was like, oh, I'm doing this by myself.
Right? Like, I am going to get good evidence, and I might freak the hell out.
Yeah.
Which she does, because when she does get there and she gets set up in her entire sleeping arrangement, the Oculus comes on. She's not even investigating, right?
No.
It's just on and it's there while she's doing her thing. It tells her good night. It tells her, like, lay, like she's laying down.
Yeah.
Paranormal and video comes out. So naturally, Chelsea's going to have a freak out moment.
Yeah. Also, it mentions squeeze.
Oh, yeah, squeeze.
I think super, like, perverted. Like,
well, and you think, in all of these different years that it's been a penitentiary, mostly men had been in there, and so they haven't seen a woman in a really long time.
No, and it's not necessarily James Earl Ray. It could be anybody. Right. Anybody in there kind of thing.
She was saying, too, that, like, the way that the prison was designed on the inside was that you could pretty much see all of the different blocks too, right? Like, if you're in that building, you can hear and see almost everything. So you're pretty exposed at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And like, once it starts going off, obviously she kind of like freaks out a little bit and she's like nervous to sleep on her own. And she does get upset about it. So she wants Dakota there a little bit. But like, the funny thing that happens here, he is so excited that it's just like saying all these things, and he, like, I don't know, does he like headbutt her, like punch her in the face?
Yeah, I think that, like, he backs up, and like while he's backing up, she's moving forward. So, like, up, and they just collide. And I think that, like, her mouth, like the ovulus in her mouth or something, like, together. So then she's like holding her teeth because she thinks that, like, she's like, is my tooth okay?
Yeah, she was not happy. That was so funny. And I think he looked nervous and he felt so bad for leaving her on her own. But we have to remember, this is for the greater good. Yeah. And we have to experiment this fear. So sorry, girl. He tells her
too, like, you pick the ovulus. This is kind of just like the consequence of these decisions. Like, it's gonna go off. And I know she said she turns it off too, like, while she's there, because she is freaked out. And at that point in time, like, you're gonna do whatever you can to preserve your experience, because you're already scared because you're alone. That's just one factor. And then when you realize the location that you're at, the cell that you're in, all of that, the fear is there. So having some sort of tool to interact with too is probably enhancing that fear. So she wants to make sure that she makes it through the road trip. And I think that's what she said at the beginning of the episode too, is that, like, my goal is to, yes, push myself, but I just want to finish, I want to be able to do all of it. So I think that she made her decision in that moment that said, if I'm going to go out the rest of the night and stay in this location, I can't have this on.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough.
Poor Tanner's in a whole different building in the hole.
Oh my gosh. And the hole is pretty creepy. I don't think we mentioned that. Like, the hole is where inmates were hung by their thumbs. Like, I couldn't imagine. And there's just no sunlight. They were given no sunlight. This could have been for months or however long, and they would lose their sight. And I feel like you would, like, lose your freaking mind being in there.
Well,
but
do you imagine being in that environment, not being able to see anything, being in pitch darkness all of the time, and then you're finally, like, your day is up, right? Like, maybe it's like 45 days, 90 days, 180 days later, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to, like, get out of this. And then you walk out of that room and realize that your sight is gone, and you will see pitch blackness as if you were in the hole for the rest of your life. Like, those conditions did not improve.
No, definitely not. And when Tanner is in there, he, unfortunately, we can't see it just due to where, like, the static cams are. He thinks he sees something, like, pop out, and that would, like, freak me out a little bit. And then he hears something like someone saying hello. I couldn't really, like, get that, but I'm not in the moment. And then it almost sounds like a door just, like, slams. And his reaction is just like, ah!
I
Like,
have never
what?
heard him. I mean, now that I'm like thinking through all of the different, episodes after this, right? Like, yes, there's been times where he's like lets out some sort of like maybe like scream or gets very like startled, but
Mhm.
that was like a guttural type scream. And it wasn't like super high pitched, but it was like very low and rough and like growly that he lets it out.
Yeah, actually, the last episode that they did before they went on their merry way to the UK, of the Sally House, when he sees a cat ball do something, I won't ruin it for people, but he has like cat-like reflexes.
He was like over the top. He was like
He just like
jumping. All of the stuff
backs
came out of this
up,
big man's body.
just reverses immediately into Chelsea, and she was like, "Huh?" And that was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Because it's just like,
And he was so
oh
excited.
my
You could
god.
tell he was excited and scared. Like he was so glad that the like experiment type thing worked. And
Mhm.
it's so cool because currently, right, they're doing all these experiments, they're collaborating with people, they're doing a bunch of stuff that they would never do. That season
No.
one them would be like, what the fuck are you doing?
I was like, "Why are you doing this? This is too much fear.
Right, this
Too
is
much,
not
guys."
what we signed up for. But in this season one, like he still keeps a lot of his composure. He is the
Mhm.
one that says, "Hey, stop getting so scared. You can't react. This is,
Yeah.
what they want." That's kind of their whole thing, right? It's like you can't show the fear. You can
Yeah.
be scared because you're going to. You just can't show it because
Mhm.
then they're gonna mess with you more.
Yeah, he's very reassuring, especially if Chelsea starts to like freak out a little bit, especially with that auditorium door bang. She's kind of like, "Sorry, guys." And he's like, "It's okay." And sometimes you need somebody in the group to be like, "Hey, like this shit is crazy, but just we'll stay a little bit composed."
Right, and you're
Um,
okay. Like things will be all right. You have people there. It's
things will be
you're
fine.
not like the fear doesn't have to overcome you.
And during this time when they're sleeping alone, we've got Alex just hanging out in the main building in the gear
Completely
room.
safe.
He's completely safe. The funny thing though, he just gets sorry, Alex. I feel like I'm gonna say sorry, Alex, a lot on this podcast. I apologize. But we love you. He gets scared by his walkie and it just goes off, and the sound that comes out of his mouth. I don't think I've never heard anything like, oh man, that was great. Nothing like paranormal happens, but at this point he's just the camera guy and nothing's really like going on. But I thought that was a really funny moment, and I
No,
apologize
even
and
like
laugh.
he does, like, even on this, like, entire road trip, right? Like,
Mhm.
even though he might be away from where the quote, like, action is with all of these haunted spots that they pick on these locations, there is no spot that you're totally immune to
No,
something happening to you. So,
definitely
the fact
not.
that, like, I don't know, and I know that he knows this, right? Like, it's not like he thinks, "Oh, I'm in the gear room, I'm fine." But he does think, like, "Hey, I'm
I'm
not
fine.
other scary locations, so I get the best one." Well, the
Mhm.
best one is still freaking scary.
Yeah, and I honestly think like, I don't know, I can't really like put words into his mouth, but I'm wondering if he thought, "Oh, I'll just go in the RV, let these guys do their thing, or I'll go outside." But they're like, "Yeah," like, and I love that they just kind of randomly brought him into it. Like they don't promote him in the start, and then eventually down the road, he's just part of the crew. And now we can enjoy Alex in Project Fear with all of his humor, which I absolutely love.
Well, and just like I think any type of project that starts out, right?
Mhm.
Like it definitely gets enhanced, you
Yeah.
modify, you make adjustments and changes, you amp up the fear factor. And one of them
Mhm.
is bringing Alex in, later to say, hey, not only are you going to have a location, you're going to pick it, like, and everybody else
Yeah.
gets to eventually pick their own locations. And
Yes.
Dakota doesn't get to be in the driver's seat, right? He does get
Mhm.
to experience the fear of the unknown a little bit more because he doesn't know some of these
Yeah.
locations, and I'm very excited to get to those spots because it does take them a little while. Dakota has
Mhm.
all of these locations planned out, but everybody does get their revenge, and they do end up having their own locations, which is awesome.
Mhm.
Um, The other thing, though, that you brought up when we were talking about the episode too was that at the very beginning of the episode, they stop for lunch at just like a spot like really close to the
Yeah.
property, and they end up running into a really interesting person.
Yeah. Yeah, this was very interesting, and it was the first thing that came to my mind. It was just almost like a horror movie. How a horror movie starts, or how the adventure starts, and you get into the storyline. They end up going to, like, it's almost like a diner gas station kind of thing. They stop and grab some food, and obviously they're talking to the locals because it's strange. One guy's got a giant camera and he's filming 3 people, so people are going to ask questions. And they were talking about Brushy, and they sit down, and there's this stranger, older man who happens to be someone who used to work there. And just the way it was, I don't know if it was the editing or what, but it just felt like, a group of friends stopped to get gas. Like, this was almost like Texas Chainsaw or something, like a group
It's
of
that
friends or somewhere.
foreshadowing, right?
Yeah,
Like
like
this vulnerable place. They're talking to somebody. They're sharing about what they're about to go do, and it is a lot
yeah,
horror-esque, right? Like, oh, we're at the camp for the weekend, or we're on a road
yeah.
trip, or we're doing this or that, and it does give those vibes. I
Mhm.
totally did not make any of those references, and when we talked about it earlier,
Yeah.
I was like, "This is gold," because I then afterwards, like, when I was rewatching it back as well,
Mhm.
that's exactly what I thought of because you have that reference, and it gives that entire vibe.
Yeah, like it felt like Friday the 13th, where it's just like, you guys are going to Camp Crystal Lake. You don't want to go there. You're all doomed, kind of thing. Like, that's
And
what
then
it
it's like
felt
roll
like.
your eyes like, "Oh, yeah, okay, cool, but we're gonna go and do this
Yeah,
anyway," and then they
exactly.
do.
And there's so many movies that do that. It's just absolutely wild to me that just casually happened to them. Like, the stranger with a accent, and he happened to work there, and he just warns them about going there, and he's just like, don't go in the hole, like, stuff happens there. And it was very
It's the
foreshadowing.
precursor, right? It's
Yeah.
like that pre type of fear that they have, not only because they do know where they're going now, right? Like,
Mhm.
they've done the packet read, they know all about the haunted history and the accounts that are there. Then they also have something in real life, right? Some sort of reference that says, "Hey, this person has experienced it, and they're going to tell us their own individual experiences, and we're about to go have ours." So
Yeah.
it sets it up, I think, so nicely.
Mhm.
And the next episode, they're still going to have the Tennessee theme, right? So
Yeah.
watch and follow along to our rewatch. Let us know your thoughts
Mhm.
on this episode. But next time, we move on to Old South Pittsburgh Hospital. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell us your scary
Yes.
stories. Tell us your comments and the thoughts that you've had about the episode as well. And we're
Mhm.
really excited to hear from you.
We are so excited. And also, don't forget to hit that notification bell if you want to know when we're posting. We are kind of going along with the theme of hashtag Thirsty Thursdays.
That's right.
So it's going to happen every Thursday around 12 p.m. Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll try to upload on those times. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who loved our first video, who subscribed, who gave us some comments back about it. And I can't wait to see where this takes us.
Absolutely. See you next time. Spooky
See
happy hour.
ya.
Out.
Bye.